This week's headlines have seriously muddied the waters when it comes to just who has come under influence by the Russians. And it appears that they were looking to influence really anywhere that they could find any vulnerability. Howard Kurtz is host of Media Buzz, also author of Media Madness, Donald Trump, the Press, and the War Over the Truth. Howie, good evening. Good to see you tonight. You know, it's interesting. Ed Henry did his report last night on Mark Warner, and there was a bit of circling of the wagons. Marco Rubio came out. I think we have a tweet that Marco Rubio said about this report. It says, Senator Warner fully disclosed. There we go. Fully disclosed this to our committee 4 months ago, has had zero impact on our work. So Senator Rubio, saying that the fact that it was revealed that he was having one-on-one discussions with a lobbyist who was working for this Russian oligarch turned out to be irrelevant to what they're doing. But, you know, when you look at that, you look at the other story this week, Howie, and I realize this is a long question, but I want to lay it out. When you look at the other story this week about Adam Schiff and the pranksters, that he was clearly looking for some dirt on President Trump, then candidate Trump, and you look at the way the Trump side of the equation has been handled, is the press handling all of these things in a fair and open, honest way?
Well, here's the short answer. Nobody looks good in this entire mess. Mark Warner, he disclosed to the committee, but it just looks questionable for him to be dealing with a lobbyist for a Russian oligarch trying to reach the dossier author, Christopher Steele. I mean, Adam Schiff was on MSNBC so often they ought to give him a contract. Looked foolish falling for this prankster who was peddling nude photos of Donald Trump. And it doesn't take away, I mean, they're not under investigation, so it doesn't take away from the importance of that memo that the president's son had during the campaign with the Russian lawyer promising dirt on Hillary Clinton. But as we know, that meeting didn't lead anywhere. So I think the press takes these one at a time, but it does sort of muddy the waters, to use your phrase.
So in terms of the FBI, Kim Strassel wrote a piece today in the Wall Street Journal, and she's saying, you know, it shows that the FBI fell for the whole Steele package that was cooked up, she says, in London over the course of weeks, that got dirt that somehow eluded the FBI, the CIA, and MI6. This Christopher Steele, years out of service, then brought it all to Jim Comey, and James Comey declared that this person was, quote, reliable, and that's why they sort of bought what he had to say. You know, do you feel, Kim Strassel's been writing about this quite a bit, how would you characterize the coverage of how much scrutiny James Comey and the FBI gave Christopher Steele over the course of all this?
I don't think there's been enough. I mean, I've always had the feeling that the Steele memo, the dossier, was unverified, was unsubstantiated. That's why no major news organization went with it at the time, though he tried to leak it, we now know. BuzzFeed was the one that published it without knowing whether it's true. And I have to say, on this whole memo battle, just to circle back to what you're talking about, I don't think the president had much choice but to approve the Democratic memo after greenlighting the Devin Nunes memo. He would have been accused, fairly or unfairly, of trying to suppress one side of the debate. But the truth is, some interest in the whole memo battle has been overshadowed now by the Rob Porter mess at the White House, by the gyrations in the stock market. And although I think the GOP memo had some important information about the origins of this investigation, for a lot of people who don't follow us the way we do, Carter Page's FISA warrant process is a little bit down in the weeds.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. We're going to dig into the Rob Porter situation and the way that it was handled at the White House in another segment that's coming up. But since you mentioned it, you know, what do you think about the way this looks for General John Kelly and for others in the White House tonight?
Well, it doesn't take a great political analyst to know that it doesn't look good. For one thing, there were questions about how Rob Porter was able to continue to work there despite not getting an FBI clearance, despite these accounts that we have now seen, one of them on television from two ex-wives alleging physical abuse. But also the White House has had shifting explanations, and John Kelly put out the two different statements. So the press kind of senses blood in the water. I think there are more focused now on General Kelly. There are reports about whether President Trump is not happy with him. I don't know whether that's true or not, but he's very much in the spotlight. And the fact that, whenever you have a series of explanations and when you have the contrast with the awful accounts by these two ex-wives, it's going to be a pretty big story.
Howie, thank you. Good to see you tonight.